Well, thank you very much for coming, and just to get in here is a real step, and as you can see, I don't want to step in the way of people's sightline, but that's the famous GreenPeace ship. My name is Gale, and this is Yisum.
Hello.
And we're going to do a short presentation, a little bit about what the situation is that we face, a little bit about the history of GreenPeace, and then some of the things we can do. And you're going to hear today from three groups, and it's not like a supermarket really. What all of the groups really are trying to do, I think, is to build a broad movement, and it's going to have to be a broad movement that really includes everybody, you know, of all different backgrounds. So a lot of us have different links with different groups. I'm for example, part of a Lewisham group that's a local group, and then I'm also part of a group that's providing well-being services to Extinction Rebellion. So there's quite a lot of overlap. And I think one of our main messages is going to be that it's very hard to look at this subject on your own, that it really makes sense getting with a group of people. That's the key bit of it.
I just want to let you know that I was a bit of a last-minute addition, so I will be relying quite heavily on my notes. I hope that's okay. A bit about myself. So I'm Yisum, and I only entered the environmental field 3 years ago. My background was in higher education and policy. Now, my natural habitat is actually not to be in front of a large audience. It is actually to sit behind a desk, do lots of reading, maybe do a bit of research, and mostly watch Netflix. I really hope that, you know, by me being here tonight, that you too will be encouraged to go out and spread the message, and also go out in front of large audiences, to really highlight the fact that we are the last generation that could halt devastating climate change. So we need as many people on board as possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam. My name's Gale, which is a Canadian name. I was born in Canada, and in my other life I'm a writer and poet. And I was sort of trundling along with climate change quite happily for the last few little bits of activity locally and a little bit nationally as well. And then I think what kicked me into action is the UN, at another level at any rate, the UN report that came out last year. And it's kind of my job to just paint a little bit of the picture of kind of where we are on climate change. And it's sort of hard stuff to listen to. I have a friend who manages to do it as a quiz, and so gets people laughing to lighten the mood, and I haven't quite worked out how to do that yet. But it's worth noticing where your own attention goes, whether it makes you kind of numb, or makes you scared, or makes you want to leave the country or leave the world or whatever. But anyway, I got kicked into action by this climate change report, and a lot of this you will know, but it's worth going through. We've basically got 12 years to limit climate change catastrophe, and that's according to a UN report. The world's leading climate scientists have warned there's only a dozen years for global warming to be kept at a maximum of 1.5 degrees C, beyond which even half a degree will significantly worsen the risks of drought, floods, extreme heat, poverty for hundreds of millions of people. And that is kind of bad enough. It's a tough thing to take on board. And the situation, sadly, may be worse than that. That is based on the known science, and there are lots of things that we actually don't know. That, for example, as the ice sheets melt, the vegetation lets off a large amount of methane, but they don't know what the result of that is going to be. So there may be escalators which make the situation more difficult, and there may be things that work in our favor in terms of survival. So it's really, there are lots of unknowns about this area, but this is now pretty much agreed on by a huge number of scientists. This is a picture, I don't know how easy it is to see, in September '84, the Arctic ice shelf, and in September 2016, it's shrunk a whole chunk. The polar regions, they're vital for cooling the climate, and the loss of sea ice means a loss in reflectivity of solar rays and further rises in temperature. In the Arctic, ice coverage is declining at a rate of about 13% a year, and that will have huge implications for things like sea level rises and habitat loss for species such as polar bears, seals, fish. In the Antarctic, in 2018, scientists recorded the hottest day of the year, which was 17.5 degrees centigrade. In terms of the corals, just let me get my notes. At 1.5 degrees rise, it's expected that coral reefs will decline by between 70 and 90%. At 2 degrees, it's reckoned that there won't be any coral reefs left. And you can see that there's a lot of life, of course, on the left-hand side, and that's a bleached coral on the right-hand side. In terms of the oceans, the risk is rising sea levels, ocean acidification, coral bleaching, and fish migration. The ocean is the largest solar energy collector on Earth. It covers more than 70% of the planet's surface. It also absorbs a huge amount of heat without a large increase in temperature. In fact, it absorbs, I was surprised by this, it absorbs half what we send into the atmosphere each day. But the challenge is that with acidification, that capacity to do that is reduced by around 25%. All of this, of course, has a huge impact on us as humans and on all living things. But I mainly want to just say a couple of things about health, displacement, and the economy. In terms of health, between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year. The direct damage cost to health is estimated to be between US dollars 2 and 4 billion a year by 2030. In terms of displacement, in 2017 there were 18.8 million new internal displacements due to extreme weather conditions. What that means is within national boundaries. If we stick to 1.5 degrees Cs, 10 million people could be protected from the risks of sea level rises. On the economy, we really don't know what the effect's going to be, and a lot of, the current state and the current direction of the economy is what's got us here in the first place. So we really, actually, in my view, we're going to have to think how a lot of economic processes work, and it's partly the unending profit motive that have got us here. The damage to property and infrastructure through sea level rise and floods, droughts, wildfires, and extreme storms will of course increase. There will be lost productivity, and there will be mass migration with a huge impact on local economies. In the words of Naomi Klein, famously, this changes everything. And I think it really does, but at all levels. Personally, it changes, what we decide we want to do when we get up in the morning, and it changes how we structure society, and it changes how we relate to our local communities in a big way. I just want to play you, there's a really nice clip of Greta Thunberg, who you'll know started off the school strike. She strikes every Friday, and it's a talk that she gave. I'm only going to play you a couple of minutes, and I do recommend that you look at it, a longer clip, but she's talking to the EU.
I want you to act as if the house was on fire. I have said those words before, and a lot of people has explained why that is a bad idea. A great number of politicians have told me that panic never leads to anything good. And I agree. To panic unless you have to is a terrible idea. But when your house is on fire and you want to keep your house from burning to the ground, then that does require some level of panic. We are in the midst of the 6th mass extinction, and the extinction rate is up to 10,000 times faster than what is considered normal, with up to 200 species becoming extinct every single day. erosion of fertile topsoil, deforestation of our great forests, toxic air pollution, loss of insects and wildlife, the acidification of our oceans. These are all disastrous trends being accelerated by a way of life that we, here in our financially fortunate part of the world, see as our right to simply carry on. Our house is falling apart, and our leaders need to start acting accordingly, because at the moment they are not. If our house was falling apart, our leaders wouldn't go on like you do today. You would change almost every part of your behavior, as you do in an emergency. If our house was falling apart, you wouldn't hold 3 emergency Brexit summits and no emergency summit regarding the breakdown of the climate and environmental.
The climate crisis movement is being led by young people, and that's how it should be. We older people have kind of got us into this mess. And with the right information, they're going to be very motivated and take the lead. We're not all going to be affected equally. The world's increasingly at risk of what the UN is calling a climate apartheid, where the rich pay to escape, to some degree, heat and hunger caused by the escalating climate crisis, and the rest of the world tends to suffer. And often the most polluting, the least polluting countries are those that are most affected. So people of colour, indigenous communities, and the poor are disproportionately affected. So that's kind of the tough, the bad news. That's the context. And we're not in a neutral system. We're in a system that grinds on towards climate degradation. And there are active partners in that. This is a slide of climate lobbying activity against climate change measures. And the interesting thing is that most of these companies are pretending they're in favour of stopping climate change, and at the same time spending 200 million to actually carry on doing it. And the worst offenders of those are BP and Shell. So that's the context in which GreenPeace and other organisations are operating, and I'll hand over to Yisum.
Thanks very much, Gale. We were born in 1971 when the US government were planning to undertake nuclear testing in Anchica Islands, and this is a small Teutonic volcanic island, tectonically unstable volcanic island on the southwest of Alaska. And should the government carry on with these nuclear tests, it would have endangered wildlife there and made the region even more unstable. So a group of activists, including Bob Hunter and Ben Metcalf, decided to sail to the island in order to stop the testing. Unfortunately, they were intercepted by the US Navy, but despite not being able to stop testing, they did spark a flurry of public interest, and they generated a widespread compassion for the cause. We went on to create this global brand. It's better? Sorry. Okay, so what are GreenPeace's values? Well, firstly, in terms of independence, we don't take any money from corporations, political parties, or the government. We rely solely on individual supporters, and this allows us to be truly independent. And also, we don't have any permanent friends or enemies. In terms of internationalism, well, environmental problems are transboundary in nature, and so we need a global solution and global reach in order to find the solutions. And so GreenPeace has built a presence in 50 countries, and we have around 25,000 volunteers. That was the last count. And of course, on the third point, we take personal responsibility for our actions and we're committed to non-violence. These are the main three activities that we do. Investigations and research. We work with the Exeter Science Unit to do some investigative work on environmental problems and to publish reports on these environmental crimes. And through the research, we're able to have a solid and credible base in which to build on. Lobbying, well, we can't do anything without lobbying. It does have a negative connotation. But we need to be able to reach out to decision makers in governments and businesses because they're the ones with the resources and responsibility to make positive change happen. And we have political advisors within GreenPeace to work with people across the political spectrum. And we do this by feeding into consultations, sitting around tables, and attending party conferences. In terms of actions, well, non-violent direct action is, of course, at the heart of our identity. We have three main types of actions. The first is photo opportunity, then there's direct communication, and then there's direct action, of course. So next is our campaigns. We have many campaigns, so I'm just going to highlight a few of them here. The first, of course, is to stop climate change, and our main aim has been for a very long time to get the government to declare a climate emergency. And thanks to the efforts of Extinction Rebellion, who are here, and Greta, who you saw earlier, this year, in May this year, MPs have approved a motion to declare an environment and climate emergency. Now, while this is a huge step, this does not legally compel the government to act. Also, protecting forests. Well, the forest, of course, is. The forests are vital in regulating the world's climate, and unfortunately, 80% has already been destroyed or degraded. And so, our aim here is to end deforestation and protect the rights of indigenous peoples and the species that depend on them. When it comes to defending oceans, as Gale highlighted earlier, it's under threat from destructive fishing, pollution, and climate change. And so our aim here is to reduce plastics making its way to oceans, prevent overfishing, and protect the Antarctic Ocean. Here, I love this photo. At the end of the Paris Climate Conference in 2015, a lot of our activists decided to create a solar symbol around the Arc de Triomphe. And just to note, we did this using a non-polluting water-based paint. So we were able to wash it off without any damaging lasting effects on the environment. The climate campaign, this protest at Heathrow Airport started in 2008, trying to oppose a new third runway, and it seems like we've been trying to do this forever, because it's a fight we're still fighting to this day. This is another image that I really find striking. In July last year, the activists assembled 2 life-size sculptures of whales emerging from the sea, from like a sea of plastic, and this is right outside the Pantheon in Rome. And this image reverberated and has led to a ban on single-use plastics in March this year. I want to highlight 3 other very big victories. So in 2015, we got Shell to stop drilling in the Arctic, and this is a result of our Save the Arctic campaign. In 2018, we got VW to pledge that they will produce the last fossil fuel power car by 2016. And in 2018, same year, Roma, which is the biggest producer of palm oil globally, has agreed to end all forest destroying palm oil production. Of course, we could celebrate these successes. There is still so much to do. In May this year, we published a draft climate emergency plan, 10 main actions. I won't go through all of them because you can find them online, but I just want to highlight that in the report, more details will be highlighted on how these are achievable. And of course, we'll be showing the slides at the end of this talk. Also, these actions, it's made at governments. It goes without saying that corporations also need to take actions, particularly those relying on fossil fuels. So, this part, how can you get involved with GreenPeace? I only started being involved around 2 years ago when I joined my local GreenPeace volunteering group in Kensington. And through them I've taken part in some non-violent direct action and some fundraising. And only very recently I became a GreenPeace speaker. And if you're interested, we have a training day on the 14th September, so please feel free to come up. Share with me your email addresses and I'll pass them along. Of course, we're very politically active. We have a political lobbying network that is solely made up of volunteers from across the UK. And this is hugely important for us in helping the decision makers to care about our campaigns. So
what's the figure there? 308?
What's that? I think so. Actually, this was on the campaign on the deposit return scheme, and this was the number of people we got to sign the campaign for, to sign the petition for.
It raises the question of, first of all, what can the individual do? And there was an article recently, I think it was in The Guardian, I'm not sure, that looked at the overall picture. And really, and I think rightly, it says the first and most important thing is to get involved in terms of taking collective action. As I say, it's so tough to work on this on your own and to deal with what comes up, but really to have a group of people around you makes a big difference. They recommended becoming vegan, eat less meat, particularly beef, insulate homes, switch to renewable energies. But there are things also, I think, just talking about the issue, there is a sort of denial that goes on in a lot of the world. So just bringing up the subject of talking to people, remembering to listen where you can, give young people accurate information. But what do you think makes the most impact in terms of CO2, the top three? What would you say was, if you were to stop doing certain things in terms of CO2 emissions, what would you put on that list?
Electricity production.
Yeah, great.
Beef.
Beef, yeah. Flying, yes. Any others? Action? Yes. Action, taking action. Fashion, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Fashion.
Is there still one that's even higher than the ones we mentioned?
Yes.
The big one?
Yes, the big one. Any guesses?
I should know.
Okay. Yeah, that would help too. Let's have the next slide. The biggest one is have one fewer child. That really, and actually it's, it's a factor of 60, and the next one down is a factor of 2, so it's a huge difference. So the order in terms of carbon emissions are one fewer child, and then live car-free, avoid one transatlantic flight, buy green energy, switch to electric cars or car-free, eat plant-based diets. And in terms of livestock, although not everyone needs to go vegetarian to help stop the worst aspects of climate change, reduction of meat is needed, particularly for beef and lamb. Even low-impact beef is 6 times more greenhouse gases and 36 times more land than plant protein. Livestock farming uses 30% of the Earth's land surface, and if all grain were fed to humans rather than animals, we could feed an extra 3.5 billion people, apparently. That's it. And you've got a summary slide. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, there was going to be a summary slide, but we seem to have lost it. But anyway, so thank you for listening.